Hello, LAM family. It's great to be with you. And I have some thoughts that I would like to share with you about why stories matter. When I think of stories, I think of individuals and how conversations take place during the course of a regular week. And it sort of reminds me, the different levels of communication remind me of an iceberg. Now, for example, there's two guys. One guy is Carl and the other guy is Joe. Carl and Joe meet and they cross every day at the street corner. And one guy says to the other, "Hi, how are you doing?" And the other guy says, "Just fine." And they go on their way. That's a very superficial level. Let's call it level one. Later on, Carl stops a little bit and he says to Joe, "Oh, did you like the result of the game yesterday?" And Joe says, "No," he said, "it wasn't my team, and I'm not interested in watching the finals anymore." Now they've gone to level two, which is sort of like near the iceberg where it meets the water. But there's really no real communication. They're just friends with nothing between them. Then Carl and Joe find themselves at university, and Carl is taking biology, and Joe is taking architecture. Now, after a number of years, they finish, they go their separate ways, and they've moved residences so they don't see each other anymore. This is like the level of an iceberg where the water meets the iceberg and churns away with the waves. They've learned skills, they've learned attitudes, they've learned how to make a living for their families, and they're doing very well. But really, they still don't know each other. Now, we know that an iceberg has 90% of the ice below the water. And one day, the bus that's going to be taking them to another place, they meet together and the bus is broken down, so they go into a coffee shop. And Carl begins to tell Joe a little bit about why he took biology. He said, "My father died, and I'm a really caring person, and I really am worried about what my father might have in the next little while." Okay, they've gone to level four. We now know that Carl is a caring person. We now know that he's compassionate. He's thinking about his family. We know much more about him. But the next time they meet, and Joe says, "Let's meet again and talk." So they do. And Joe says, "Well, why did you take biology?" And Joe and Carl says, "The reason I went into biology is because, I was not a very good guy when I was a young man. I really disappointed my dad. I made him very sad." And he tells his story, and out comes a long, long story. And Joe just sits there and listens. That's level five, in which now there are internal conflicts within the person. This story that I've just told you reminds me of a Bible story in which Jesus met a woman at the well. And this conversation starts about water. But it gets to level five conversation very soon. And Jesus is talking to her, and the conversation ends up about worship, a wonderful passage about worship. And she then goes and tells everybody in her Samaritan village. I'm saying this because stories matter. All the stories, great stories of the Bible, they start off with normal things with people like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and Daniel and David and Joshua and Esther. All these people had great conflicts, but it's because we have their stories that stories matter. And so I encourage you to find ways to use the story of your life to be able to share with others. In summary, stories matter. Thank you very much.